Hello, everyone. Yeah, how are you? My name is Mike Curtis. I'm the VP of Engineering at Airbnb, as the slide says, I think. And I look after our engineering and our data science teams, where really everything that we work on in technology at Airbnb is about bridging the online and the offline world. So the title for today's talk is about laying the foundation for deep learning at Airbnb. And so before I even get started with that, I thought I would address something that you might be wondering, which is like, why the hell is somebody from Airbnb standing up here talking about deep learning? I thought that thing was just a Ruby on Rails app sitting in front of a MySQL database. Well, we do have a Ruby on Rails app, and we do have many MySQL databases, but it turns out that the problem is much harder than that. And our challenge really comes in a couple of forms. So the first is that we have millions of guests who stay on Airbnb, and we also have millions of hosts who host on Airbnb. And the thing is, every single guest is completely unique. They have unique tastes, they have unique needs from what they want to get out of travel. And then, every single host is completely unique as well. They host in spaces. These aren't blocks of hotel rooms, these are people's homes, and the spaces are as unique as the people who live in them. So it's up to us to really figure out how to create great matches between these guests and hosts. So that's like the first reason why this is pretty challenging. The second is that our product is actually out there in the physical world. So when people book online on Airbnb, what we're really doing is trying to set them up well for an offline real-world experience, which means we have to do everything we can online to try and make sure that that's an awesome experience offline. And the stakes for this are really high. It's high because we know that in a lot of cases, our guests might be planning like their one vacation a year. It's like an expensive purchase. It's really important that we get it right. Important for them and important for their family. So the stakes are pretty high on it. So everything that we do in technology at Airbnb is really about creating great matches between guests and hosts. That's the most fundamental technical challenge that we place. And we know that doing that well is a data problem. How can we look at things like travel patterns, demographics, click behavior, et cetera, to try to figure out what will a great match be? And that, of course, is where AI comes in for us. But because artificial intelligence is such like a crazy buzzword right now, I figured I'd at least define a little bit what I'm talking about. Really, AI, the term, and you maybe you already know this, I'm not sure, but it's really like the umbrella term under which a lot of other technologies like machine learning and deep learning fit. And it's really just this conceptual framework of machines being able to exhibit human-like intelligence in their decision-making. Machine learning and deep learning are really just technologies by which AI can be achieved. And this stuff is not new, right? AI has been around, or conceptually it's been around since the 50s. But you've been hearing a lot about it lately because there have been huge advances, particularly around deep learning in recent history, in the last couple of years even. And that's really happened because of really the confluence of a couple things. One is these massive data sets being available in a way that they were never really available before. And you take that and then pair it with the widespread availability of GPU processors. And what that's enabled is being able to train deep neural nets, another way to say deep learning algorithms, on huge data sets much faster than ever previously before. And that, in turn, has unlocked a huge amount of opportunity in this area. And just to explain quickly how these technologies work, again, not knowing how familiar everybody is, but any of these things, machine learning or deep learning, actually mimic our own brains. And I'll give you an example. So when you first meet somebody for the first time, right, and you see their face for the first time, your brain makes a judgment about whether that person is male or female, so you know what pronouns to use to address them. And the way your brain makes that determination is based on the thousands and thousands of people that you've met before, the faces that you've seen before. and knowing whether they ended up being male or female. That's your training data. And so what's really happening behind the scenes is your brain isn't telling you for sure it's male or female. What it's really doing is based on all that training data, coming up with a probability, a recommendation for you about what it is. And from that, you make a decision. This is exactly how machine learning and deep learning work. So the reason I talk about that is because the foundation for any of this technology is really about data. Data is the fuel that powers AI. So at Airbnb, pretty much everything that we do in this area has been about extending and improving our capacity to store and process huge amounts of data. So we actually started this work years ago, and I'm going to talk about 3 sort of fundamental building blocks. The first thing that we worked on was the ability to capture and ingest events. So we built a very robust logging system. Internally, we call it Jitney, like a Jitney bus. It's based on Kafka, which is an open source technology you can use. And that enables us to be able to stream pretty much in near real time events that are coming in from production. We store every single click, every single impression on the mobile apps or on the website. And engineers or data scientists can also instrument easily to be able to store any kind of events that they want and stream that straight into the data warehouse. We set up originally to create something that was common and that anybody could use in a consistent way to be able to capture and ingest events. And that was sort of step 1, building block, be able to get the data that you need. Once you have the data, of course, you have to be able to store and process it. So the next major investment that we made was around our data warehouse and processing capability. Our data stack is based on Hadoop, another open source technology, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. And our team does data processing with tools like Hive, Presto, and Spark. So that's like our data warehouse piece and how we process the data. Then we also invested in internal tools around data transformation. So when you get all of that raw data in from production, you need to be able to take it from raw form and process it into a form that can be used to query and derive insights or train models. Internally, we developed a tool that we call Airflow. And Airflow actually processes all of our ETL jobs happening in production. Last year, we actually open sourced Airflow, and it's become one of our most popular open source projects. A lot of companies are now using this for how they do their ETL processing, so you should definitely check it out. All right, so now you're able to ingest and capture events. You're able to store and process them. The final really important piece of establishing a foundation for being able to use deep learning is the ability to experiment. And this is really important because you need to know whether these models that you're training are actually doing what you want them to do for the business. So again, internally, we invested in a tool that we call our Experiment Reporting Framework, or ERF, because we're creative like that. And this system allows engineers, actually with a very little amount of code, to be able to instrument an experiment in code. And that experiment could be a simple like UI variant, right? Like a different UI treatment, all the way to a different ranking model for search or for something else. They can easily instrument it in code, push that code to production, and then it automatically, behind the scenes, does all of the data capture and ingestion into the data warehouse such that it can be used to evaluate the experiment results. And those results just start showing up as soon as it starts collecting data. Now, the thing that's amazing about this framework is that it can not only tell you about the specific treatment that you're working on, right? Like, for example, did a new search ranking model result in more people contacting listings? That's a good thing for our business, right? So that would be a positive experiment. But it can also tell you, not just whether you did that one thing, it can also tell you the impact on all of our other business metrics. So for example, you may have increased the contact rate of people contacting listings from search, but you may have also increased the number of contacts to customer care. And based on that trade-off, that might not be the right decision for the business. So that's really like the power in the experimentation system that we set up. This is really important for machine learned and deep learned models because the same as what I just talked about, anytime we're testing a new model or training it with new inputs or new features, we need to be able to tell what kind of impact it's having on the business. And so it's really important that you have a strong experimentation capability to make that possible. So I think about those three things as sort of like the pre-work to being able to enable machine learning or deep learning at your company. So what we've done with all that foundation in place is be able to start leveraging these technologies all across our stack. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about search ranking, because search might be the most important feature on Airbnb. It's how people ultimately succeed in booking the place that's right for them. I mentioned this earlier, but every guest and every host on Airbnb is completely unique. And for that reason, what's right for one guest might be totally different than what's right for another. Because of that, we have to personalize search rank. Everybody who searches on Airbnb gets results that are different and tailored to them. And we do this by essentially inferring guest preferences based on their interactions with the app. As they go through the trip planning process, like engaging with listings, like clicking on listings, making inquiries, we learn more and our model gets trained more about what their preferences are in terms of things like location, price, amenities, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons of features that go into the model. And based on that, we can better incorporate those things into personalization and re-ranking of the search results, so we're constantly pushing up better listings for you. One of the areas that we're investing in now is actually to go even a step beyond that and start thinking about things like the look and feel of a home. It might turn out that look and feel, the things that are present in the home, can be important for a decision that a guest is going to make about where they're going to stay. Another area that I'm super excited about, and another thing that we're feeding into our model now, it turns out that we can make a prediction with a fair likelihood of success of whether or not, for any listing that you're looking at in the search results, whether or not you would give that place a positive or a negative star rating if you actually went and stayed in it. We're getting better at being able to make that prediction. And what we can do now is we can say, after you've booked something, we understand what our probability was that you were going to have a good stay there. Then we can follow that through all the way to the trip that you took and see what the actual result was and be able to feed that back into the model. See, one thing that's important is we want to drive more bookings on Airbnb, of course, right? We want more people to book and be successful finding a place to stay. But even more important than that is we want you to have a great experience when you actually go travel. So the prediction score of being able to say how good of a stay are you going to have could be one of the most important factors that we eventually work into our search ranking model. Right now, and kind of up until this point, our search rank has primarily been trained with gradient boosted decision trees, GBDT. But we're starting to think that we may have run into a wall with what is possible with feature engineered machine learning models. And this is kind of why we're starting to investigate more and dig into deep learning technologies. Our latest experiments are using deep neural nets. And one of the early models that we have on this for search rank is actually starting to show a significant booking conversion gain over all the previous feature engineered machine learning models that we've used in the past. And so we think that deep learning could be a way that we're able to unlock a whole new field of opportunity for what we're able to accomplish with search rank. So obviously pretty excited about that. All right, so I talked a lot about search rank. I talked a lot about the building blocks to be able to enable deep learning. But that's really only one area that we use this. I didn't talk at all about fraud prediction. I didn't talk at all about conversational UI. I didn't talk at all about customer care. These are all things where we're thinking about and starting to deploy deep learning technology against the business problems at Airbnb. But I want to, as we sort of close up the talk a little bit, I want to step back for a second and share something that I find a little bit ironic about the work that we're doing here. So much these days, what we hear out there is about how AI is going to replace people or replace jobs or whatever. I mean, you can think about self-driving cars, for example. That's going to replace a lot of jobs. And I think that's a very real thing, right? That's going to happen. It's going to happen over the next several years. But one of the things I love about the way that we're using the technology at Airbnb is that I think that the way we're using AI technology is actually to enable connections between people and to enable economic opportunity through something that is fundamentally human connection, that can't be replaced by AI. So I find that obviously very exciting. We're very much at the beginning of what we think we can do with deep learning at Airbnb. And I think we're at the very beginning of what this technology is going to be able to do in the world. I will stand here and say that I believe deep learning will change the world as much in the next few years as the internet did in the last 20. And it'll probably happen much faster than we think. Even if you look at the advances in the last couple of years, it's unbelievable how much of a step change there's been in things like machine translation, for example. Because we see that coming, we have just started what we're calling an AI research lab at Airbnb. This is one of our first steps into doing true research. We've just started getting it off the ground. And one of the first things that they're working on is what I talked about earlier, which is being able to sort of do like object recognition or feel recognition of listings and homes, such that that can be fed back into the search rank model for better conversion and also for a better experience downstream. This work is very new. We just started it, and we're going to learn a lot more over the next year. But the thought that I'll leave you with is this. I think that planning travel right now is unbelievably complicated. If you think about planning a trip, you have to go to like multiple different websites or multiple different apps. You have to talk to lots of people. You have to figure out tons of logistics. In a lot of ways, you can spend as much time planning a trip as you actually spend going to take that trip. And it really shouldn't be that way, right? One of the reasons why I'm excited about this investment that we're making at Airbnb is because I believe that one day, if we get really good at this, you should be able to come in, you should be able to open the Airbnb app, and you should be presented with a few trip itineraries end to end that are perfect for you and that you can book in a single click. That's where we want to get to. That's how easy it should be to plan travel. And I think that deep learning is one of the main ways that we're going to be able to get there. So thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of the show.